Elizabeth's Gift by Alison, Hector. It was the fall of my 9th year in this life. It was the beginning of September. All the butterflies that could were flying south for the season. The ones that remained were too weak, too old, and would die before the first frost. There were many butterflies that year, much more than usual, it had seemed. That part of the fall had always intrigued me. The time after those that were to live another season left. I was entranced by the slow motion dance of the rainbow of butterfly beauty. They fluttered so softly, quietly, and slowly. I would not have to run after them to catch one. Out of respect and love, I would not ever try. I knew it was my privilege to be able to watch them so closely. Every day, after school, I would stay with them as long as I could. On one of those early days in September, as I turned to go home, a butterfly landed in my palm. I had talked to her for a while and tried to set her free. She would not leave me. I took her to my apartment. I created a nest for her with a cardboard box and filled it with grass. I called her Elizabeth. Elizabeth was always with me. She would sit on my shoulder or in my palm. She told me what to feed her, sugar water, and the sliced fruits she would eat out of my hand. I adored watching her insert that long black tongue straw into a fruit and receive nourishment. She fascinated me. I observed her every motion with care. Elizabeth, I would call her, and she would come. She would come only to me and no one else. I created dances for her and was inspired by her movements. She was pure and she was sensual. The powder on her wings were sacred fairy dust. I tried not to touch it. I knew if the magic dust was destroyed that she could not fly. Even though she was dying, especially because she was dying, she still needed to fly for as long as she could. As the days waned, she started to grow weaker. It was long past the butterfly season. All the other butterflies were gone from this world. She would sit in my palm only if I placed my hand in her box. She could no longer fly, but could still flutter her wings. Every night I prayed for her to live another day. I was afraid that my heart would stop when her wings stopped their flutter. On the last day, I raced home from school. I kneeled by her box, weeping copiously. She was very limp, but still alive. She lifted her head with all her strength and walked carefully for the last time into my palm. She looked at me before stretching out to let me know she would be at peace. She would be flying to a better place. Her wings stopped their flutter. I wanted her to take me with her to fly higher and higher to that better place. Instead, she gave me her last gift. As Elizabeth began her journey, part of her essence flew into my heart. Ever since that moment, I have had an extra heartbeat that the doctors cannot explain. With this gift, I've been able to cope and survive difficult circumstances with grace and dignity. I knew that Elizabeth's story would be significant and symbolic throughout my life. The meaning continues to be revealed. It is stories like these that sparks the intimacy of human and nature. My mother's words inspired me to ask a question. When was the first time that I had realized my connection to nature? The question reminded me of the first time I had accidentally stepped on my collection of snails I had gathered on a warm summer day. I hysterically cried to my father, "I killed them!" I was 2. That same year, I had experienced the same depth of emotion when my sister was born and I held her in my arms. These feelings of connection and sameness on this intimate depth within is my relation to nature. And I believe that through these expressions of environmental art, reading poems, taking photographs, and creating sculptures is our way to reawaken and communicate these shared human emotions. My art is the way I reestablish the bonds that unite me to the universe. It is a return to the maternal source. Through my earth body sculptures, I become one with the earth. I become an extension of nature, and nature becomes an extension of my body. This obsessive act of reasserting my ties with the earth is really the reactivation of primal beliefs in an omnipresent female force. The afterimage of being encompassed within the womb is a manifestation of my thirst for being. Anna Mendieta. In my studies, I've seen how expressions of artwork in forms of pictures, videos, dance, poems, and stories have created a bond between me and different cultures that I would have otherwise been able to relate on such a deep, intimate level. These expressions arise in emotion and passions of feelings of earth, when relating to nature specifically. And I think that's the beauty of artwork. And I see these intersections of art and nature and environmental justice to form a platform in which we can relate to each other. And this connects us to issues in ways that otherwise seem separate. What we see here through studying these artworks and seeing sociological systems, that there's actually an ideology that is the foundation, and it's called hierarchical thinking, a perception of diversity which is so organized by a spatial metaphor, up and down, that greater value is always attributed to that which is higher. So we can see this systematically in governance, in media, in history, in our home life, in schools, and in our patriarchal world. It is when men, specifically white men, dominate, and they're looked at. This becomes clear to see when we look at the mind, body, spirit analogy that is shown in religious context, where men are more attributed to spirit, and there's immediately becomes a disconnect where body is looked on at as demonized, as hell, as this thing that we want to become better than. So now we're trying to achieve spirit, and man is closest to spirit, and anything that is less than man is suppressed, and that usually relates to women, and it usually relates to the environment. So when that happens, we don't respect Earth in the same way. We don't see it as a nurturing, caring being. We see it as something that needs to be dominated, and something that we can use for resources, control, and then eventually rise above, leaving this space to somewhere better. So when we see this in present times, we see prostitution occurring, we see malnutrition, and we see the disconnect between people and their land. And for instance, prostitution happens because the resources is literally sucked dry from the land, usually being colonized from people that are not of the land, that have came in from other places looking for resources, and they suck dry the indigenous people's food. And so when this happens, women are at the forefront, and they're usually poor and uneducated and might not have the means to fight back or take their land and control in that way. And so women are the ones that are the caregivers for their children, whereas men are more playing a role in the systematic governance and are not as in touch with the land, and women are out working on farms and gathering food for their children. So you see an immediate blow there. And so when there's no more resources, women have to find another way to take materials and food, and it leads to prostitution, selling of bodies, selling of their children's bodies.
Boom, boom! Them boys like that bass loud. Boom, boom! Them girls shake it. Boom, boom! Them girls dance. They bend over taking tips and G-strings. Drunk on slurry, holding up their middle finger, thumb out in a West Virginia sign they shout. Damn right we looking for a come-up. Where else we got to go? We 49th on America's list of opportunity. Them boys say they like it when them girls talk back. They say they like 'em a little wild, a little wonderful. So they just smack 'em on the ass and watch them girls tumble down. Them boys know some of them West Virginia girls can't count. Not 8 plus 1, so they laugh and call them names like crazy, like whore. Just after they take all their mineral rights.
To review what I talked about throughout this video, art can, in fact, evoke deep emotions about nature in an empowering and empathetic way. And we can use that to bridge societal differences, cultural differences, gender differences, and orientation differences. Creativity, I think, is the solution to a lot of our larger issues and gives us a clear overlying perspective of the root cause. And if we just do a little bit of digging and find out what the foundational root cause is, in this case we talked about patriarchal norms and how that affects how we treat each other and the environment, then we can use it to not only educate each other, but relate on a deeper level and have a more cohesive and more beautiful future.